Good morning, friends. Welcome back. Hope you all are doing fine. I am doing fine too. Myself, Dr. Gibran Ahmed, brings to you Simply Pathology, and today we are going to continue Tissue Repair Part 3. So we are going to see what are the factors which are affecting the wound healing. So number one is infection. So infection prolongs the inflammation and potentially can increase the local tissue injury, and it is also the most common cause of delayed wound healing. Second important cause is diabetes, which you all know is a metabolic disorder, and it is the most common systemic cause of abnormal wound healing. Third is our nutritional status. Now, vitamin C deficiency as well as protein deficiency inhibits the collagen synthesis and can retard or delay the healing process. Steroids or glucocorticoids, now they are anti-inflammatory in nature because they are going to inhibit TGF-beta. Now we all know that TGF-beta is involved in fibrosis. In the previous video lecture, we have already discussed the role of TGF-beta. So steroids basically inhibit the TGF-beta production, so there is no fibrosis, and that will lead to scar weakness. Now there is a very important clinical aspect to it. Now clinically, if you see, the steroids are used in corneal infections as they reduce the fibrosis or the corneal scarring and thus prevent corneal opacity. Then we are having certain mechanical factors. Increased local pressure or torsion can lead or cause the wound to break apart or to dehisce. Okay, so mechanical factors are also contributing towards delayed wound healing. Then poor perfusion due to peripheral vascular disease or arteriosclerosis, diabetes, obstructed venous drainage, example varicose vein, all of these factors can impair the healing process. Then we are having foreign bodies. Now foreign bodies, for example fragments of steel, glass, silicon, they may delay the healing process by inciting chronic inflammation. Now the eighth point is the type and the extent of tissue injury. Now stable and labile cells, they have complete regeneration or restoration or healing, whereas permanent tissue, as we all have read before, they do not have any capacity of regeneration, and healing process takes place just by scarring. Location of tissue of injury. Now inflammation when occurs in the tissue spaces, for example peritoneal, pleural or pericardial space, okay, and if they are filled with large exudates, then healing will occur by scarring, and that is called as organization. Whenever such inflammation is small, when there are small exudates, they are completely digested and cleared, and that will lead to resolution. Now we are coming to a very important part, that is the example of tissue repair and fibrosis. Now there are two things that we are going to read today. One is how there will be healing of a skin wound and fibrosis of parenchymal organs. Now let us read about the healing of skin wounds. Now healing of the skin wounds can take place by two methods. One is there will be healing by first intention, and second is there can be healing by second intention. So let us see what are those. So healing by first intention. So when injury is involving only the epithelial layer, the principal mechanism of repair is epithelial regeneration, and this basically is known as healing by first intention or the primary union. And the most important example or the most common example is healing of a clean, uninfected surgical incision which is approximated by sutures. Let us read about the healing by second intention. So when the healing of the tissue loss is more extensive, such as in large wounds, abscess, ulceration, ischemic necrosis, infarction in parenchymal organs, okay, the repair process will involve a combination of regeneration as well as a scarring. Example, healing of a skin ulcers. Now let us go into the details of each. First we are going to read about the healing by first intention. Now let us look at this basic diagram. Okay, so there has been some kind of an injury, and now this is a surgical incision that has been made. Okay, so the first step is wounding. So what happens that when there is an injury, for example a surgical incision, so what will happen? First there will be bleeding and there will be clot formation, and this clot actually, how does this clot happen? Actually there is stimulation of the clotting cascade, wherein fibrinogen is converted into fibrin, which along with fibronectin and complement proteins will give rise to a clot. Now what we see on the outer aspect, okay, we see a dehydrated external surface of the clot, and that is called as a scab. Also I have labeled the epithelium and the subcutaneous tissue. Now let us see the steps of wounding. So once there is an injury, there is a wounding that is going to stimulate the coagulation pathways. Okay, after that there will be formation of a blood clot containing fibrin, fibronectin and complement proteins. Now the clot basically stops the bleeding, and it is acting as a framework or a scaffold for migrating cells which are attracted by the growth factor, cytokines and chemokines. So clot basically provides a framework for tissue repair to take place. Now the second, what happens within 24 hours? So in the next 24 hours, if we look at this wound, what we see that the blood clot is here, and it is dominated by acute inflammatory cell, that is the neutrophils, as has been shown in blue. So, and yes, there is blood supply which is going to supply the essential nutrients for repair process to occur. So within 24 hours, the neutrophils are going to accumulate at the margins of the incision, migrating towards the fibrin clot. Also, if you see the basal cells, okay, the basal cells at the edge of the epidermis shows increased mitotic activity. So these are the basal cells in the diagram. Now within 24 to 48 hours, the epithelial cells from both the edges, they begin to migrate, forming a thin but a continuous layer that will close the wound. Okay. Now by day 3 to 7, what is happening, that neutrophils are slowly replaced by the macrophages, whose major function is to clear the debris and to promote angiogenesis and extracellular matrix deposition. So after this, what happens that there is, yes, this is our blood clot, and then there is appearance of the granulation tissue. Okay, so let us see on day 3, the neutrophils are replaced by the macrophages and granulation tissue will invade the tissue space. By day 5, the neovascularization process, that is formation of new blood vessels, reaches peak or is maximum, and these vessels, as we have discussed before, are leaky. Okay, then the stroma is edematous and there is increased amount of fibroblast, okay, which will lay down new collagen as well as extracellular matrix protein, and all these three things together forms a granulation tissue, and it is the new granulation tissue. Let us move ahead. Now during the forthcoming weeks, okay, after 7 days, okay, in next few weeks, what are the changes that we will see? So essentially the epidermis has now become normal, there is no clot as such, and there is a cellular connective tissue deposition which is devoid of any inflammatory cell. So looking at this basic, during the second week, what is happening, that there is a continued collagen accumulation and fibroblast proliferation. So the edema, vascularity and the inflammatory cells which were characteristic of the granulation tissue has now reduced, has now decreased, as you see, okay. At the end of the first month, the scar is formed which is composed of a cellular connective tissue. So by cellular I am meaning composed of fibroblast. Cellular connective tissue devoid of inflammatory cells, plus it is covered by an essentially normal epidermis. But we have to remember one thing, that the dermal appendages which are lost in the line of incision is permanently lost. So now you must be thinking, what are the dermal appendages? So basically the dermal appendages, they are the, for example, the hair follicles, the sebaceous glands. So all the different appendages that are present in the skin is the dermal appendages. Now we will see healing by secondary intention. Now more or less I want to tell you firstly is that all things are same, but healing by secondary intention will occur whenever the tissue defect is very large, okay. So in the first 24 hours, so what are the differences from the primary healing process? So in the secondary healing, the tissue defect is quite large, So automatically the fibrin clot formation is also very large, and the neutrophils, the amount of neutrophils that accumulates is also large. So the inflammation is more intense and there is a greater potential for inflammation mediated injury. Okay, going to the next step of healing by second intention. Now in day 3 to 7, what are we seeing? We are seeing that the macrophages, fibroblast, new blood vessels which are leaky, and a loose edematous stroma, okay, develops, and all these four things we know are the constituents of a granulation tissue. So what is the difference? The difference is the granulation tissue is much larger in size, so much larger amount of granulation tissue is formed. At first the matrix is composed of fibrin, fibronectin and type 3 collagen. After 2 weeks, the dominant collagen that is laid down is type 1 collagen. Okay. Now this third important slide in healing by second intention. So at the end of first month, what is happening? The original granulation tissue is now replaced by a large pale avascular scar, which is composed of fibroblast, which is pink in color, dense collagen, which is black, elastic tissue, which is marked in blue, and we have extracellular matrix, which is brown. Okay, now the dermal appendages again, which is lost in the line of incision, is completely or permanently lost. And at the end of first month, we are having an acellular connective tissue with no inflammation and an intact epidermis. Okay, so yes, this is the intact epidermis. So now we come to wound contraction, and one important feature of wound contraction is that it is a part of healing by second intention, okay, by secondary intention. So wound contraction occurs only for larger wounds, okay. So when the wound is very large, so approximation is not possible without wound contraction. So wound contraction basically helps by closing or reducing the gap between the dermal edges and by reducing the wound surface area. Now wound contraction is an important feature of healing by secondary union. It's a very, very important MCQ. And it is brought about by modified fibroblast, which is also called as a myofibroblast. So essentially, myofibroblast are nothing but fibroblast with smooth muscle-like property, that is, they can contract. So fibroblast with contractile property is called as a myofibroblast. Now within 6 weeks, the large skin defect may be reduced to 5 to 10% of the original size, okay? And this is how the wound contraction takes place. Now, one thing I want to tell you about fibroblast, and this is common to both primary and secondary intention healing. Now fibroblast migration and proliferation, okay, they are brought about by certain cytokines. So fibroblast migration is brought about by PDGF, TGF-beta, FGF, TNF, whereas the proliferation is brought about by PDGF, TGF-beta, FGF, TNF, interleukin 1 and EGF, and all these factors are released from the M2 macrophages. And the basic function of fibroblast, as we all know, is to produce the extracellular matrix and the collagen. Now let us look at the wound strength. Now wound strength is a very important topic for exam as well as a favorite Viva question. So wound strength, remember, whenever, okay, a carefully sutured wound is having 70% strength of normal skin. So for example, there is a basic incision, okay, and that incision is closed by a suture. So at that point of time, the strength of the wound, okay, that has been sutured is 70%, and this is because of the suturing. So when the sutures are removed at the end of 1 week, the wound strength will become 10% of the normal skin. So how does the recovery of the tensile strength of the wound occur? So it occurs by two mechanisms. Firstly, because of excessive collagen synthesis over collagen degradation during the first 2 months of healing. And second is because of cross-linking of collagen fibers and an increased fiber size. Now a very important MCQ over here is that the wound strength reaches approximately 70 to 80% of the normal strength by 3 months, but usually never beyond that point. So very, very important MCQ. Now we will read about the fibrosis in parenchymal organs. So we have already read about the healing of the skin wounds by primary and secondary intention, and now the second important example is the fibrosis in the parenchymal organ. So let us look at few points on fibrosis. So fibrosis denotes excessive deposition of collagen and other extracellular matrix components in a tissue. Usually the parenchymal organs are involved by fibrosis in chronic disease. Fibrosis is induced by persistent injurious stimulus such as chronic infections and immunological reactions and is associated with loss of tissue, and it may lead to substantial organ dysfunction, even organ failure. Now the major cytokine which is involved in fibrosis, another important MCQ, is TGF beta. Okay, now very important thing is, now which cells are going to produce the collagen in fibrosis and which are the tissues which are involved. So in case of lungs and kidney, it is the myofibroblast that is going to produce the collagen, whereas at the level of the liver, the stellate cells basically produce fibrosis. Now what are some of the fibrotic diseases? So we are having liver cirrhosis, systemic sclerosis, okay, scleroderma, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, pneumoconiosis, drugs, radiation-induced lung fibrosis, ESRD standing for end-stage renal disease, and constrictive pericarditis. Now what is the mechanism of fibrosis in parenchymal organs? Again, it's a very interesting slide. So suppose this is the epithelium and there is a limited injury. So now this epithelium is going to regenerate and everything will be normal. But if there is a severe or repeated injury, okay, then there will be inflammation and loss of tissue architecture. This is followed by stimulation of the T lymphocyte and other lymphoid cells as well as the macrophages to release cytokines, example interleukin 13 and TGF beta and MMPs from the macrophages. All these cytokines is going to lead to fibroblast proliferation and differentiation, myofibroblast recruitment, and extracellular matrix deposition leading to fibrosis. So this is the mechanism of fibrosis in parenchymal organs. Now abnormalities in tissue repair, again a very important question both at the MBBS undergraduate, that is, and the postgraduate levels. Also it is very important for NEET super specialty examination as well as NEET PG. So what are the abnormalities in tissue repair that we are going to read? So there are defects in healing. For example, there is ulceration as well as wound dehiscence. There is excessive scarring, okay, which is composed of keloids and hypertrophic scars, exuberant granulation, and then there is wound contraction. So defects in healing process, this is the first one. So it occurs due to inadequate formation of granulation tissue or formation of a scar, and it can be of two types. One is ulceration, one is wound dehiscence. So first let us read about ulcers. So the first ulcer that we are going to read about are the venous leg ulcer. So it basically occurs in elderly patients, okay, and it occurs because of chronic venous hypertension, for example varicose vein and congestive heart failure. Deposits of iron or hemosiderin because of RBC breakdown is there in these ulcers. That is why they are blackish, okay, and the basic reason of these ulcers is because of poor oxygen delivery. Second are the arterial ulcers. So very important thing is that they are associated with atherosclerosis of the peripheral arteries, sometimes can be associated with diabetes. There is atrophy and there is a more amount of skin necrosis compared to venous ulcer, and it is often painful. Arterial ulcers are painful. Let us look at the diabetic ulcers. Now it affects the lower extremities, particularly the feet, okay, and there is extensive tissue necrosis and there is failure to heal because of vascular ischemia. Also there is neuropathy. So over here you have to understand that diabetic ulcers occur because of two things. One is there is a reduced immunity, okay, so healing is delayed, okay, and there is always infections because of that. And second, there are neuropathic ulcers, means there is autonomic neuropathy in these patients, and because of that what happens, they do not have sensation in the legs. So if they are if there are stones in the road, so they will step on it and they will injure themselves without even knowing them. So this is how diabetic ulcers are caused. And histopathologically we can see ulcer and we can see extensive granulation tissue. Now we have pressure sores. Now these are areas of skin ulceration and necrosis which is caused by prolonged compression of tissues against a bone. For example, elderly patients with numerous comorbidities who are bedridden. So it occurs because of mechanical pressure. Now the second leg that we have read, that we are reading about the defective healing. So under that we are having ulceration and wound dehiscence. So the second leg under the defective healing is wound dehiscence. So what does a wound dehiscence means? So whenever a surgical wound or an incision reopens internally or externally, we call it as a wound dehiscence. The basic risk factors is obesity, malnutrition, infections, vascular insufficiency, and vomiting and coughing in case of abdominal wounds. Now let us look over here. So this is a classic example of a venous ulcer. As you can see, there is not much necrosis and the areas show a discoloration or blackishness because of deposition of hemosiderin. These are venous leg ulcers. Secondly, we can see these are arterial ulcers. If you see, there is no such blackish discoloration, but the extent of tissue necrosis is more, and these are painful ulcers. Now look over here, these are the characteristic diabetic ulcers. If you see, there is extensive necrosis, there is extensive huge ulcers, and there is defective healing. So these are diabetic foot ulcers, typically affecting the feet. And these are the bed sores which are actually involving the dependent part. Here we have the sacrum. These are the bed sores. Now the second abnormality of healing that we will see is excessive scarring. So excessive scarring can have two things. One is hypertrophic scars, one is keloids. So hypertrophic scars refers to accumulation of excessive amount of collagen which will give rise to a raised scar. It grows rapidly, contains abundant myofibroblast, and it tends to regress over several months, and it happens after thermal and traumatic injury involving the deeper layers of the dermis. About keloids, if the scar tissue grows beyond the boundaries of the original wound and do not regress, okay, it is called as a keloid. And there is an individual predisposition to keloids. It affects the African Americans, and over here we are having thick collagen deposition in the dermis. Now the third abnormality of tissue repair or healing is exuberant granulation. Sometimes you will find an excess amount of granulation tissue which is even protruding above the level of the surrounding skin and which blocks the reepithelialization. So this is called as a proud flesh. Excessive granulation tissue, okay, has to be removed by cautery or surgical excision. Now, rarely, sometimes the incisional scars or the traumatic injury that take place is followed by exuberant proliferation of fibroblast, and this will lead to what is called as desmoids or aggressive fibromatosis. Now, these are actually somewhere between benign and malignant low-grade tumors. Now the last leg is the wound contraction. Now wound contraction is a part of normal healing process. If there is an increased contraction, it will lead to contractures, and that will lead to wound deformities. Now the most common site for contractures are the palm, soles, and the anterior aspect of the thorax, and it is most commonly seen after serious burns and can compromise the movement of the joint. Thank you very much guys for watching my videos. I hope you are liking them. Please do share and subscribe my videos, and you have any doubts, please do comment. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. We will come with more such videos.